to see you guys this morning. Thank you, Elizabeth and Ken. That music, amazing. So I've been reading a little bit of Rumi poetry, and that's where the message this morning is coming from. I think this hurt. Am I echoing here?
Yes.
So, I guess turn it. Okay.
Chad.
Turn this off. For now. No, it's going to pick up. It's going to feedback off the monitor. You just need to turn it off.
All right. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Good. For me too. So the message this morning, the title is "Everything," the place where everything is music. And it comes from a Rumi poem from those of you who are familiar, the 13th century Sufi poet, very familiar, very widely read, and I really enjoyed reading this one, meditating on this one, letting it speak. That's one of the things that you guys assigned me to do, is to go out and find some spiritually uplifting text of some sort and meditate, ruminate on it, and come back and share with you the ideas that come from that. So thank you for that assignment, for that responsibility. I really enjoyed that. In this poem that Rumi writes, he says that we've kind of fallen into the place where everything is music. And it's not so much, as we'll see as we go along, not so much the art form that he's talking about as an object lesson of grace, I guess, if you will, the divine. The divine is everything. And when he talks about the fact that music is everything, it's that the divine is everywhere and everything. So the first paragraph says, and when I first read this, I had this picture of they're having a jam session. You know, a bunch of musicians getting together and they're playing and singing and having a good time, whatever. And somebody in the group is saying, "Man, that song, that was perfect. We got to remember that. We got to put that down on paper. That one was just perfect." And so the poem that Rumi has, he starts off by saying, "Don't worry about saving these songs. And if one of our instruments breaks, it doesn't matter. We have fallen into the place where everything is music. The strumming and the flute notes rise into the atmosphere. And even if the whole world's heart should burn up, there would still be hidden instruments playing." And so Rumi is saying in there, don't get caught up in trying to create a form, trying to say, look for a way that the divine is one special way, that the divine is in one special form, or one special, sometimes we can get caught up in wanting to say, define the divine, and say, God is this, or God is that. Sometimes we maybe even ascribe a feeling. We have a certain feeling, say, "Oh, yeah, that's the divine inside of me." And what he's saying is, I think, is go beyond that. Go beyond. Don't worry about saving these songs, even though there's a marvelous expression of the divine. And we had this, and when you listen to Sufi music, from the sources I read, it is a jam session, basically. It starts off with someone playing one or two instruments, and there's only one or two instruments that play other than percussion in them. A reed flute and something similar to a guitar or stringed instrument of some sort. And so they'll start playing, and then somebody will start reciting a poem or a song and the words, and then somebody else will come in and sing a different part and add to it, and pretty soon it becomes this ecstatic expression of what is being sung and what is being said in those words. And so you can imagine that when you get to that place where everything is just clicking, everything is just clicking. The person who's sharing those words are just tying in perfectly with the music, and you're just hearing, and your toes are tapping, and you're feeling the beat, you're feeling it, and you're just celebrating the divine. And I can see where there'd be a really temptation to say, "Oh gosh, we got to record that. We got to lock that up. That is the perfect expression. That is the perfect times. We don't just let this go. This is perfect." And what Rumi is saying is, don't worry about saving these songs. This music, we fall into the place where this music is everything. This expression, this experience of the divine is always there. It's always ours. It's always our experience. We don't need to put lines around it and definitions to it so that it's only experienced one way and experienced the same way again next week. I'm sure that some weeks when they get together and start jamming, it doesn't quite click as well as it did in other times. You're like, man, if we just had last week's song going, But he's saying, no, let it be new. Let it be new. Let yourself realize that the music is everything. And it's interesting that he says, don't worry about whether instruments should break. Now, if he's talking about the Fort Worth Symphony and the 8th viola breaks a string, you're like, oh yeah, well that's no problem. We're still going to be able to create music. But in this music, there's only 2 instruments playing. So if one of them breaks, and he goes on to say, if the whole world's heart, if every instrument in the world should burn up, there would still be hidden instruments playing. In other words, the divine would still be there. That spirit that we're celebrating, that beingness that we're celebrating through the music would still be there. We wouldn't have to rely on having an instrument there, having some kind of form there, whatever. Inside, we would be celebrating the divine. And so he's saying that we're better off not trying to save those songs, because if we do, we end up stifling the expression of the divine in our lives. If we try to put certain lines and certain definitions around the divine, then we end up stifling our ability to allow the divine to be the divine in our lives. And he goes on to say, so the candle flickers and blows out. We have a piece of flint and a spark. So he's daring in that line, he's saying, even if we lose an aspect, even if we lose sight of something, and all of a sudden that fire is not there anymore, and we feel maybe a little lost. I don't know if any of you have gotten to a place where I think all of us come from faith traditions that are different than what we're celebrating here this morning. And there was a picture of God, if you will, a picture of what it was to be the divine that had to undergo a drastic change, alteration in how we pictured God and how we see God. And what he's saying is, even when I have to go through a situation where I lose that fire and I'm without, he said, we have a piece of flint and a spark. The divine doesn't go anywhere. Just because my sense of that divine is clouded for a moment or for a time, it doesn't mean the divine goes away. That the spirit is still there. The energy that is the flint, the energy that is the spark that starts that fire is always there. And so he says again, everything is music. Everything. So what is the nature of this music that Rumi is talking about in this? The next paragraph he says, the singing art is sea foam. The singing art is sea foam. The graceful movements come from a pearl somewhere on the ocean floor. Sea foam is a very specific picture that he's trying to create. Today, in today's world, with pollution being a little more rampant, we see foam on water a lot, and it stays there. It stays. But in his day, what sea foam is this has resulted in the water agitating, the water moving and being agitated. The nutrients that are in the water stir up and become a foam or a spray of some sort on top of the water. And sea foam, by definition, is very short-lived. It's very short-lived. It's not something that stays for a long time. And so what he's saying is the singing art is sea foam. The picture I get is the idea that it takes some agitation. It takes some movement to get us to see this, to see the divine moving in our lives, to see the divine in our lives. That there's always some agitation that leads to this music becoming a part of our lives. The singing art, again, you hear the love songs from people who are experiencing it for the first time, or you hear the blues from those who have lived some difficult times and those sort of things, or the spiritual songs similar to this morning's, where you've gone through some difficult times and realized love is all. Love is all. And so that agitation that causes the sea foam that he's talking about, that music is always in us. That experience is always there to be had as a result of the different things we go through in our lives. And that agitation can be positive or negative. Sometimes it's a very positive experience, and there's a song, there's an expression that we have of that moment to give voice to that moment. And so he goes on to say that the graceful movements come from a pearl somewhere in the bottom and the ocean floor. And that speaks really a neat picture, I think, for us of just the treasure and the mystery that is this expression of the divine that we have within us. A pearl is by rule a very rare find, particularly back in his day when they were making cultured pearls, but they were just finding them in the water. So it's a rare thing, and also a very valuable thing. The pearls carried a great price for them. And it's also, the pearl was again, it says the pearl was found somewhere on the ocean floor. So there's an air of mystery there about that pearl, about the movements that are part of this singing, that are part of this music that Rumi is talking about. And there's the movement in a song, the movement in the singing. It takes it from just being a tune to being an experience, from being just a lilt to being something that again, that is experienced, that is felt, that is had at the time. And so he's saying that part of this music is this singing art, this expression of the tune, if you will, of music. He goes on to say that poems reach up like spindrift. Poems reach up like spindrift and like driftwood along the coast, wanting. This whole idea of spindrift, again, is a very specific term that he uses in there. It is that spray that we see on a wave that is caused by the violent motion of wind on the water. And usually it's the level of violence is considered a gale force wind that creates spindrift. And so he's talking about, again, this whole idea that poems reach up like spindrift. In other words, the words to put to the experiences that we've had, the words to put to the agitation that we've experienced, those things that we've gone through that have started to maybe make change in our lives, to bring us to a point of awareness and such. Those words, I don't know if you've been through an experience where it either hurt a lot or was extremely joyous and celebration, and you just couldn't find the words to put that experience to. You just couldn't find quite the words that fit for that experience. And maybe we found it in somebody else's poem, reading somebody else's poem. Maybe we found it in a song we heard on the radio, whatever, and the words of it. Maybe we found them ourselves in journaling and writing poetry, whatever. But those words allow us to take those experiences from just, again, either just whether it's painful or joyous, whatever, and integrate them into our being. And so Rumi is saying this music, that everything that is music, part of that is this idea, these poems, these words that show up like spindrift, again, wanting. The words want to be heard. The words want to be apprehended. The words want to be known. There's something inside of us that when we experience something, we just want to articulate it. We want to say what it is that it is we've experienced. Somehow figure out a way to put into words and capture that experience that we've had. Again, whether it's a pleasant experience or otherwise. And she says, these poems, they derive from a slow and powerful root that we cannot see. They derive from a slow and powerful root that we can't see. Again, the mystery. The mystery. This whole idea of that music is everything, and wanting, advising us, encouraging us not to try to capture it and have it in a certain form, comes from that idea that the divine is a mystery. The divine is a mystery. There are so many times when we want to box up God. We want to box up the experience of the divine, say God is A, B, C, D, and put it in our pocket and go on with our lives. And just say, okay, I've got that solved. Now what? Let's move on to something else and figure that out. And so we try to, because it can be uncomfortable to live with, I don't know. It can be uncomfortable to live with this mystery of the divine in our lives and not knowing. It also calls for us to spend a little more time in fellowship and in silence with the divine, to know the divine. If it's on a 4x5 card, it's pretty easy to just carry around. We don't have to give it a whole lot of attention because I know God is A, B, C, D. That's who God is. But what Rumi's suggesting is to let God be that mystery. Let God be that mystery, that music that is everything, the divine that is everything. Is somewhere, again, found on the ocean floor or derived from a root that we can't see. And so he's saying, I believe that we come to this place in our lives where we can know the divine is everything in our lives. The divine is everything in our lives. And that divine presence, that divine reality is something we can't put into words. We can't exactly state perfectly, but should remain a mystery. And in that, there is that energy. In that, there is the energy, because everything is the divine. Everything is the divine. And we get to that place in different ways. Some of us, everybody gets to that place where the divine is everything in different ways. Some of us go through life experiences that allow us to let go of old ideas, old beliefs and such, different things that happen, different mentors, teachers in our lives. But there's one thing I think that is essential to knowing that experience, to being able to enjoy that experience of the divine being everything. And it's something that Rumi talks about in the last two lines of this poem. He says, stop the words now. Stop the words now. Open the window in the center of your chest and let the spirits fly in and out. Open the window in the center of your chest and let the spirits fly in and out. That practice of quiet, that practice of stillness, where we give God no name, we've got no picture, no outline, but just experience that stillness, experience that quiet. That is essential if I'm going to know, I'm going to be able to live out this reality of the divine being everything. And so I'll take Rudy's advice and stop the words now.